Welcome to Calming the Chaos podcast, where we help you find peace in a chaotic world. I'm your host, Tracy, licensed mental health counselor. Calming the Chaos provides self-help resources for people in crisis. It's not a substitute for counseling or psychotherapy. Thanks for tuning in. And now, let the chaos begin. And here we are again, talking all things chaos. I'm Tracy Canella, and today we're going to be talking about something that plagues a lot of my clients, which is depression. And for a bonus, we're going to be talking about mixed anxiety and depression, and a way that has been around for centuries to be able to help calm the chaos of any kind of pretty much emotional, mental effects of anxiety and depression. Here with us today is Dr. Alex Joannou, and he is from Sydney, Australia. So as it is right now, 6 p.m. my time on a Thursday night, it is 7 a.m. his time, and the next day on Friday. And so Dr. Alex is going to come up here and talk about his work with acupuncture and how that is not a scary thing, and how I should possibly be able to explore that if I'd like to calm my own chaos. And maybe I'll just give it a try. We'll see if he can convince me. Right now, I'm just going to go ahead and bring up Dr. Alex Joannou. Welcome, Dr. Alex, to Calming the Chaos.
Thanks, Tracy. Yes, I always like a challenge, so I'm up for it.
Right. You're going to have to convince me, because I am really not sure about some of these images I have been seeing. They're just kind of scary when you think about it. So
yes, the actual images look scary, but the actual process itself is very gentle and quite easy and relaxing.
Well, I hope that you're able to talk about it, because I know that you are a medical doctor and have a background in medicine. So I don't think that you would be doing this if it was harmful. But why don't you just go ahead and tell us about yourself and how you got involved in medicine, and then how you transitioned into doing acupuncture.
Yeah, well, it was quite a journey. I've been a doctor for over 40 years. And most of that time, 40 years as a general practitioner. And I was quite happy doing general practice as it's taught from the Western medical viewpoint, until back in 1992, I developed Crohn's disease, which, for those of you who don't know, is quite a severe bowel disorder where it becomes quite inflamed. And I was diagnosed as having it and had 2 large abscesses in my abdomen. And within a week, I had major surgery cutting out a couple of feet of intestine. After that, the surgeon said I'm cured, because I said, should I follow any particular diet or anything? And he says, oh, no, eat whatever you like. You're cured. So I did. And within 6 weeks, I started getting symptoms again. So that wasn't my idea of fun. And felt quite, I was about 20 kilos lighter than I am now, which gives you some idea how thin I was. And that started me on a journey of looking at alternatives. Initially looking at mega doses of vitamins and things what's today called integrative medicine. And that helped for a little while, but then again the symptoms came back, and I ended up on a path looking at traditional Chinese medicine. And all things down that path, which is quite a different view of the body from the Western medical approach.
Yeah, so your own journey took you to somehow getting to the needles or acupuncture, right?
Yeah, so when I first I went along to a workshop. It was just an introductory one-day workshop just to see what it was all about, and I was impressed that there were doctors there who were Western doctors, but they were also Chinese, ethnic Chinese, and into acupuncture and Chinese herbs. And their whole view of the body was quite different from that of the West. And it just, I'd never considered the possibility of seeing the body in any other way than what's generally described in Western medicine. And yeah, that really opened my eyes to a whole new world.
Yeah. So then how was it that you were able to be given acupuncture, and were you afraid?
Um, I don't know if afraid's the word. Excited. I was definitely excited because I'd read a lot about it, the potential of what it can do. And I thought even if 10% of what I've read is true, this will be worth it. And it well and truly was.
Yeah, tell us about what you have found that acupuncture can truly do, because I know
Mm,
this episode highlights what's most commonly presenting in my office as mental
mm,
health issues, which is
yes.
mixed anxiety and depression. But I know
Hmm.
acupuncture does more help than that, than to treat those sorts of mental health conditions. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more about what acupuncture can do.
Right. Well, it's generally working on the level of mind, body, and spirit. So, I mean, as a doctor, when I first started learning this, my natural thought was to try it on people with chronic pain or severe pain that wasn't controlled by painkillers, like people waiting operations on their knees, for example, hip replacements and so forth. And so I did that, and they were getting good responses to the to pain relief, which was fantastic because they were often able to reduce their medication or even get off it completely. But then, after a while of treating chronic pain and a variety of other medical problems, I realized that the people were telling me that they were feeling so much better, just mentally. And particular things like saying that they didn't have any arguments with their spouse anymore, that they were quite happy, and then in their work, they're finding that they were still getting problems in their work, but they were handling the problems with much less emotional upset and stress. So it was my wife actually who urged me to check this out. My wife's a medical doctor too in our practice. I ignored her advice for a while, as most husbands do. And yeah, there was one particular patient I was blown away because I started treating her with acupuncture because she had widespread arthritis, and within 2 or 3 weeks she was able to get off the opioid painkillers, which she was very happy about. But then after a month or two, she said, "Can I stop my antidepressants?" And when she told me more about it, she had been on antidepressants for 16 years. And I'm going, well, okay, well, let's have a look. And then when I assessed her on a DAS score, which is a depression, anxiety, stress rating scale, she was presenting as normal. And so I weaned her off the antidepressants over a period of a month or two. And she felt not only wasn't depressed, but she actually felt happier coming off the medication, in that she started to experience emotional stuff much better. It was around Christmas time when this happened, and there were Christmas carolers came to her door and were singing. She opened the door and they were singing Christmas carols, and she burst into tears, but it was tears of joy, and she was just amazed and just in a sense of wonder about feeling that the impact of hearing the Christmas carols. And she said, by comparison, she had been dead for years on the medication, which antidepressants can make you less depressed, but they don't actually make you happy necessarily.
Hmm.
And when I told my wife this story, she says, "Oh, you've got to research this. You've got to find out what's going on." So I did.
Did she start getting along better with her spouse? Because if that's going to happen, I am in. You've almost
Uh,
sold me.
well, she was didn't have a spouse, but much happier with her daughter, her adult daughter.
Ah,
This was a woman in her mid-60s, and the thing was that was 11 years ago, and she still comes to our practice, and she hasn't been on antidepressants since. And not only that, she hasn't needed any painkillers since either. She just occasionally takes Panadol.
is
And
that right?
yeah, and I thought, well, perhaps she didn't really need the antidepressants. You know how doctors can prescribe antidepressants and patients just keep taking it through habit or something. So, but when I looked through her notes, the previous year, her GP tried to withdraw her from the antidepressants, and within 6 weeks, she started getting symptoms again.
Mm.
So, and as I say, this is now 2011 when I took her off, and that's 12 years ago, and she's still she's still happy.
So as you were weaning her off the
Mm.
antidepressants, you were also doing acupuncture, and that's what made the
During that whole
difference?
time, yes. Well,
Yeah.
she hasn't needed acupuncture since. I haven't seen her as a patient for acupuncture for years because she just hasn't needed it.
Explain how acupuncture works in the body. I know it works somehow with the body's energy system,
Yeah.
and part of that energy would be your energy about depression and having depression or anxiety, even physical pain, like you were talking about, chronic pain.
Yeah. No, that's a really good question, and it's involved a lot of people, a lot of time over the years investigating these things. I guess you can look at it from a Western medical viewpoint, and then you can demonstrate that various neurotransmitters are released or stimulated with the insertion of the needles. It's been demonstrated that acupuncture causes the increased production of serotonin, which is the neurotransmitter that antidepressants are working on. And it helps calm and switch off the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic nerves, so you don't release adrenaline as much and cortisols and other anti-inflammatory hormones. So the body settles down. But I guess from the Chinese perspective, which is where I get excited, is because the Chinese associate different emotions with different organs in the body. And therefore, if say like irritation and anger and frustration can relate to the liver gallbladder area.
Okay.
And interestingly, when you nail points relating to the liver and gallbladder, a person can often release a lot of anger or a lot of frustration. Lungs can relate to sadness and grief, and needling those points, if people have stored up grief from some sad event and they haven't fully processed it, the emotion is released. And sometimes people will cry in a treatment and they don't even know what they're crying about. They can't relate it to anything in particular. And sometimes it is related to specific events that they can recall.
Right.
But it seems that that's the natural, it speeds up or catalyzes the natural process in the body. It's just our mindset that we hold these things in and don't grieve openly or whatever. We're supposed to be good citizens and quiet or gentle or kind or whatever. And that people then tend to suppress those things, and the emotions are stored in the body. So acupuncture releases that.
Well, so we just added another one, which is anger. What else? What else does acupuncture help? We've gone through depression, anxiety, and anger, and chronic
just
pain.
the worrying. Just people over a few treatments will usually feel a whole lot calmer, and they can get into quite a deep meditative state during the acupuncture. And if people who practice meditation regularly, in any case, will usually get quicker and deeper responses to the acupuncture. But I've certainly treated many people who've never had any experience like that before, and are just blown away by the improvement they get.
Does it help something like eating disorders or ADHD, anything that has to do with
Well,
phobias?
it can help in all those regards. I mean, certainly, I can recall a specific patient who, after her third treatment, said that she was able to drive to the surgery, and it had been the first time she had driven a car in many months because of her panic attacks and so forth. And she had hardly left the house. The first couple of times her husband drove her to the clinic, and I think the first treatment even sat in with her because she was quite nervous and anxious about the whole thing. But by the end, she got her life back.
So how many treatments was she in there for?
About 8 or 10, something
8 or
like
10.
that.
Okay. Yeah, it's relatively quick.
In fact, a couple of times I've tested it to see how quick it can work. Earlier this year, I was in Canada to meet some friends, and a friend of a friend was depressed and had been on antidepressants for 18 years because of the severity of his depression. And in fact, when I assessed him, when I met him, he was quite depressed, even though he was taking medications, and very anxious. and I treated him once a day for a week. And by the end of the week, he was no longer depressed, which was
Wow.
quite remarkable. He felt quite happy. I mean, I don't think that was a cure. He was still on antidepressants.
Mm-hmm.
And, unless you change your ways and speak to a counsellor and debrief and so forth, if you don't follow up with treatment, well, you tend to regress. But the thing was, he got that improvement in his emotions and mindset in that shorter time.
Mm-hmm. So acupuncture itself is not going to be a cure-all, but used in conjunction with possibly counseling. Is that what
Yeah,
you
I would
would
think
do?
so. Yeah, I mean, part of that is me talking to my patients sometimes, but yeah, if a lot of people have got some really terrible events in the past and so on, and usually it helps to process that with a psychologist or counsellor, somebody of that degree. And
Nice.
yeah, but the thing is, once people start releasing those emotional things and talking about events, inevitably brings about change. And once you're on that path, most people want to keep continuing
Right.
because they don't want to go back to the way they were feeling before. And I think, you get to a point where they're cured because they're not going to go back to the way they were. I've certainly treated people with PTSD. There was one particular woman who had been sexually abused by her father as a kid. It was just a terrible thing, but that had come up through counselling, and then she went to the police. And in the meantime, a friend of hers told her to come and see me for acupuncture as well. And she went through the whole process with the police and with the courts, and ultimately her father was sentenced to jail for a few years. And it was also against her sister and her mother, who were defending the father and didn't believe her story. And she said she wouldn't have coped if it wasn't for the acupuncture she was having during that time. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I get blown away by the stories I hear from my patients all the time. And that's
Yeah.
why I think I've got to bring this process to the world, because, I'm not a young man anymore, and I don't want to die with this process, and the process die with me. So I'm out to train other acupuncturists.
Yeah, that's how partly what you are doing. You are a
Mm,
retired medical doctor, but you're doing acupuncture 1 day a week, but then you're also heading a lot of training for people who want
mm.
to be trained to be acupuncturists. I assume you have to be a medical doctor first, or can you just maybe
No,
drill off the street?
if a person's a licensed acupuncturist, I can teach them, so they
Oh,
don't have to
okay.
be a Western medically trained.
Hmm.
Mm.
Great. Well, so if I wanted to go into an acupuncturist's office, what could I expect?
Hopefully, it'll be a lot more pleasant than you think it's going to be.
Is there a
I mean,
bunch of music, and
yeah. I mean,
waterfalls and like the traditional Chinese sort of
yeah. I
decor,
think
or
most acupuncturists try to reproduce that kind of atmosphere because
Mhm.
they understand that a lot of patients who've never tried acupuncture before will be, you know, at least a bit nervous, and some are quite anxious. Um, I mean, I try to reassure people that it's not as bad as they're expecting or the images that they've seen on the internet. And I just say, well, let's
You mean
just
like
try
this?
one needle. Yeah, something like that, which looks scary, but uh, it's amazing how non-painful it is. And the vast majority of patients, I say, well, let me just put one needle in and see how you go. And I put one needle in and they go, oh, is that all there is to it? And then they're quite happy for me to continue.
Okay. Yeah, so you walk in and you've got this sort of Zen atmosphere, and you
Mm.
go into the, I guess the acupuncture, the needle
Mm.
room where you get poked, I guess,
Yeah,
and there's these needle. They look like they're sharp. Doctor Joannou, I mean,
yeah.
Doctor Alex, they look like they're really sharp.
It's interesting. They're not actually sharp. They're blunt. It's just that they're very fine. If you look under a microscope, the actual ends of the needles are round. And
Okay.
what happens when you insert the needle, it tends to push blood vessels and nerves to one side or the other. That's as opposed to like having a blood test or be given a vaccination where the needle has a beveled edge which cuts tissue. cuts into the skin, cuts into the wall of the blood vessel, and that's what causes pain, is that
Okay.
beveled edge. So this is much finer. Some of the needles are hardly thicker than a human hair. That's
Oh,
how fine they
okay.
are. Yeah,
All
very
right.
fine.
And then do you ask a bunch of questions about why are you here and what would you like to
Sure.
accomplish? And then
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
get an idea of what what
Hmm.
you're going to treat.
Yeah, yeah. I usually give them a questionnaire, which the way they answer informs me as to what's going on, because I'm asking questions about their mind, the state of their mind, the state of their body, and even their state of their spirits, how they're feeling emotionally, and so forth. And that gives me an idea of what's going on in their body and what
Mm-hmm.
to treat.
And during that process, are you able to make that person more comfortable and being able to,
Yeah.
if it's their first time?
If it's the first time, I guess eight or nine times out of 10, the people that go away with their smile on their face, they're quite happy that it's nowhere near as frightening as they thought. They actually go away feeling relaxed. I mean, some people can hop off the bed and take a few steps and say, "Oh, I feel better already," or "I feel
Mm-hmm.
different," or "I feel like I'm floating." Things like that.
Sign me up for that.
Sometimes it can stir things up, particularly if there's a lot of stored emotion, repressed emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not always, but if it's going to happen, like some sort of emotional outburst, it's usually within 48 hours of the treatment.
Okay.
They might go home and suddenly scream at their husband or about something that's relatively trivial, but it's a whole number of years of pent up stuff that comes
It
out.
just, yeah, it just releases
Yeah,
with all
yeah.
that.
Or I've
Mm.
had the odd patient that says that they cried all day and didn't know why they were crying, but they felt better afterwards.
Kind of like you're poking the bear a little bit, right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's part of the problem of antidepressants. I think is, I mean, they're generally working by suppressing that emotion. So if you're depressed, to feel less depressed is a relief, but it's not actually genuinely moving you through to a state of happiness. And
Right.
that's where acupuncture is quite different in that regard.
So how long do I spend in on the table? It's a table, right? These
Yeah,
things
it's like
are,
a massage table. Yeah.
yeah. How long do I spend in there on there? And
Well, I mean, there's different treatments. So the shortest is probably about 20 minutes. I mean, I'm often giving treatments that total time is about an hour and a half from the time you walk in to the time you leave. And
mhm.
that's because I needle the people twice, once while they're lying face down and once while they're lying face up. And the combined effect, I find, is a lot stronger and more powerful and gets quicker results, which is what people are after.
I
Hmm.
guess I just come back until I start to think that I don't need any more treatment, and then come back whenever
Yeah,
I do.
yeah. Well, generally, I reckon for mental health issues, particularly, and also pain, usually once a week for about 8 weeks. And often the effect of the acupuncture only lasts a day or two, and people feel better definitely after a treatment. But then after a couple of days, it wears off. But then
Nice.
over succeeding weeks, they find that the effect lasts longer and it gets stronger. So that once they get to the stage where they feel good for the week, then I say, let's do it fortnightly. And then when you feel as good in the second week as you do in the first week, then I'll make it every 3 weeks and so on. And sometimes people only need to come in once every 2 or 3 months for a top up, so to speak.
Hmm. Well, that doesn't sound too bad. I'm
No,
gonna
it's
go
not.
ahead and put your website up here. It's a really kind of catchy name, stickitodepression.com. And
Yeah.
so how did you come up with that idea?
Yeah, it was just brainstormed in a group actually. I was about to write my book about this, and I'd had a whole bunch of different ideas, and somebody shouted out, "Why don't you call it Stick It to Depression?" I thought it was
Yeah,
everybody laughed, so it was a good response, and everybody thought it was great. So I
yeah.
used that.
Cool.
Yeah,
So here is his website. This is Dr. Alex right there. With, I must say, I am wearing a Hawaiian-ish kind of shirt today in honor of you. You always have this cheerful sort of attitude towards you. This is transforming
yeah.
depression through acupuncture. You want to tell us a little bit about your website and the services that you have to offer? And of
Yeah,
course, you're
yeah,
in Sydney, right? You're in Sydney, Australia.
yeah, just outside of Sydney. But yeah, I'm now doing training throughout the world via the internet. I've I've trained acupuncturists in live workshops in Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, and now doing it online. So I've got my first Canadian acupuncturists that I've taught, and from the UK. Would like to get some Americans on board with this. And as you can see there, I'm actually running a retreat. This is for acupuncturists next year. And that's where I actually got the idea of the shirts, the bright shirts, because when I've been to Fiji there 12 times now, and every time I come back fully recharged and feeling happy, and yet I'm actually out there, and some days doing 30 treatments on villages, the nearby village, and but I don't feel tired or exhausted. I feel energized. So
Nice.
I was talking to my wife about it, and I'm just wondering how I could maintain that feeling of that I had in Fiji back in my clinic. And it was like came my wife with the bright ideas. Said, "Why don't you buy some bulla shirts, which are the Fijian bright shirts
Oh,
with
yeah.
hibiscus flowers,
Oh,
like
yeah.
Hawaiian shirts."
Mm-hmm.
So I did that, and not only did I maintain the feeling of being on holiday by wearing those shirts, um, my patients would smile when they'd see my shirts, and this is fantastic when you've got patients with depression, to get them out of their troubles, and they just start smiling because I'm wearing a bright shirt. And so sometimes the patients themselves will come and start wearing bright clothing. Often
Right.
people who are depressed wear very dark clothing, or drab, and suiting the mood they're in, type of thing. So
Yeah.
it's one of the ways you can help depression is just by wearing brighter clothes.
Yeah, yeah. I see you. You actually were featured in a lot of major networking
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of interviews or articles, and then there you are again in another bright shirt.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I saw that you had some sort of a coverlet on one of your patients that was a little bit. Yeah, there you go. It looks a little bright there.
Yes,
So
yeah, I
I
use those silk
thought,
shawls.
yeah,
Are nice because they just so light, and when you put them on top of needles, it doesn't. The patients don't feel the pressure of the weight of the shawl on the needles,
yeah.
and it keeps them warm as well. So yeah, I mean,
Outstanding.
use every opportunity to make people feel comfortable with the process.
Hmm. Looks like you've written some books as well. There's some books
Yeah,
here. Let's see if it'll actually populate this, or I have to.
yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah.
can see it here.
Yeah, so Stick It to Depression, Another Tool in Your Doctor's Bag was my first book, and I wrote that specifically to tell doctors, medical doctors, about the advantages of acupuncture for their patients. So I get a lot of referrals from doctors around the town to help
Mm,
their patients. And then I wrote Stick It to Depression, Get Your Life Back Naturally, which I've written to help the general, which is that one there, to help the general population understand about uh, how acupuncture can help their depression. So it's written in a little bit simpler language, I suppose.
nice. Well, yeah, so your website is on screen, and
Yeah.
if anybody's interested to go and
Yeah.
check it out, go
Mm.
ahead and do that. Anybody wants to go to Fiji, there's that going on, and actually catch some of the Fijian spirit there, and
Yes.
awesome. Yeah. So I wanted to say that from a mental health perspective,
Mm.
something that actually helps depression is learning something new. Now, I know this is
Mm,
your acupuncture sort of what do you call it, cure for depression, and I get how that works
mm,
and everything
mm,
like that. So, but I love teaching people something new. So I thought we would
mm.
try a fun little game to see if we can teach the audience something new, and
All
it
right.
has to
Okay.
do with Australian animals. What do you think
All
about
right.
that? Okay,
Okay.
let's see.
I'm up for it.
All right, I'm going to go from
Mm.
the least recognizable to the most recognizable. So let's see how good you are and how good our audience is. All right, so here's thing number one. What is that? This is an
Yeah.
Australian animal.
Well, I would say it looks like a wombat.
You are correct, sir. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, 1 for 1. Okay, all right. You paused a little bit there, so you had to think. So
I've only seen a wombat in the wild once. It was just walking down the street actually,
yeah,
which was in a
yeah. Well,
rural area.
it was probably pretty happy, or you probably would have stuck a needle in it. You know. All right. So thing number two.
Mm.
What is that?
Oh, looks like a Tasmanian devil.
It is now
It
that
is.
one looks like it needs a couple of needles. What do you think? It looks like it might.
Yeah, well, I don't think it would let me get anywhere near him with a needle because they
That
can be quite as aggressive and snappish as that photo looks.
well, do you think that this one has some problems with his spouse at home and possibly some yelling fits?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, I had never seen that before, and so I had learned something new, and
yeah.
hopefully our audience has learned something new. And then we've got this one, and let's see if you can catch this one.
It's either a baby kangaroo or an adult wallaby.
It is a wallaby
Yeah,
indeed, and I think,
I mean,
I look in the head is a little bit longer, and then
mm,
the actual body
yeah,
is smaller, right?
yeah. The wallaby is much smaller than kangaroos. They're,
Mhm.
yeah, the biggest ones would probably be up to about my waist height,
Yeah. That
whereas
wallaby
an
there.
adult kangaroo can be taller than me.
Oh,
6 foot plus.
that wallaby looks like it could do some acupuncture with its claws, and it looks like it's already had some acupuncture because it looks very zen to me.
Yes, yeah,
Mhm.
it's pretty chilled.
All right, and this one's one I didn't know either. It looks like a cool little dog or a big
Oh,
dog.
it's well, I wouldn't say cool. Dingo.
Oh, why wouldn't you
Um,
say cool?
they can be quite aggressive
Mm.
around campsites. Yeah,
Ooh.
you don't feed dingoes.
You don't?
No, because
Oh,
they
okay.
only encourages them to come into campsites and that. I don't know if you're
Oh.
aware of the Azaria Chamberlain affair
Mm-mm.
some 25, 30 years ago. Dingo ran off with a baby, and this was at Uluru, Ayers Rock.
You know,
And
I might have heard something
and the
about
mother
that.
was, in the end, they charged the parents with murder. And the mother was actually jailed and imprisoned, and then a few years later, they found the actual what do you call it? The little jacket of the baby
Oh my
at a
goodness.
dingo site, and it was just terrible.
Wow. Yeah, well,
So,
they probably should have been a little bit more careful with their kid, right?
yeah, well, the baby was only like 6 weeks or something,
6 weeks old,
and
and
the dingo had gone into the actual tent and grabbed the baby.
oh my
So
goodness,
yes,
that's awful. All
but
right, well, so it
in
looks like a cute little
yes,
dog, but not so much. Beware.
no, yes,
If you ever go to the land down under, please do not feed the
mm.
dingoes at the campsite, and keep your babies very
Yeah,
close to you.
not yeah. I mean, I've never seen a dingo at a campsite, so it's not like. But yeah, it does happen apparently.
Well, you are 4 for 4 now. Let's see. Now, these are the ones that you are very widely recognizable, so you're probably going to get 100%. Way to go, Dr. Alex. This is.
Whatever, to be a kangaroo with a baby
I
and
love
the
this
little Joey in the
picture.
pouch.
A little jelly in a pouch. Yeah, yeah. And the last one is, I was going
Like
to
a koala.
doctor this up and put some needles in it, but it kind of looks like it's got some needles in it
Yeah,
already.
yeah.
He looks like
Apparently,
he's stressed out.
so the koala, they only eat a particular species of eucalyptus,
Mhm.
And apparently the oil in the eucalyptus leaf turns into some kind of sedative type drug. So they do, they are as sleepy as they look.
I've heard that, and I've also used
Mm.
eucalyptus in my counseling practice to try and calm
Mm.
people, just to kind of to put it in my little filtration
Yes,
system, and it
yeah,
really helps. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to try some acupuncture. I'm going to do some research. I'm going to try and figure something out, maybe get some
right.
recommendations from people and see if
Yeah.
I can find a licensed acupuncturist. And I'm going to go in there and I'll report back to you and
I'll be
see
very keen
what
to hear how you
happens.
go. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right. So again, this is Dr. Alex's website, stickittodepression.com. Really can't forget that name. And this is not that scary. It is
It
really
isn't.
not. Even though some of those look like they're going in pretty far, it's supposed to really help. Any parting words or thoughts you'd like to have, Dr. Alex? It was sure nice
Oh,
having you, and thank you for uh, amusing me with the game about the
that's
Australian
all right.
animals.
Throw in a bit of chaos there.
Well, exactly, just to see how you handle it. You did great. So yeah, any parting words you'd like to
Oh,
say?
I just say give it a go if you're half interested. Just at least try once
Yeah.
to find out what it is. But it can be very powerful, very subtly so, and
Mhm.
can shift stuff that you often people come in for treatment and they walk out noticing all sorts of things have changed in their body, not just the particular issue that they had. So
Nice.
it's definitely worthwhile. And even if you haven't got any mental illness but feeling a bit stressed or frazzled, acupuncture will settle things very quickly.
Well, I'll give it a try. Thank you
Good
so
on you,
much for
Tracy.
being here. Yeah, thank you, and for hopefully you have a nice day and have a good evening. And
Yeah,
thank
thanks.
you again for joining us on Calming the Chaos podcast. I appreciated you being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Calming the Chaos podcast. If you found this podcast interesting or helpful, please like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You can also go to www.calmingthechaospodcast.com to listen to all Calming the Chaos podcast episodes. I look forward to sharing my next podcast episode with you. In the meantime, take care. Howl at the moon or something like that.